This is probably one of the biggest debate shutdowns I've seen in a while because Tim Pool just went off on leftist influencer Luke Beasley about the Democrats' favorite subject, January 6th, a subject that they claim to know everything about but haven't taken a second of their own time to research the key details, and that's essentially the Democrats' position off of every subject. And that's why I love Tim Pool's argument, because he effectively summed up their argument on why they think it's acceptable to jail political opponents, but as usual they lack any morality and show how evil or even arguably fascist these types of people are.
You have.
No,
right?
I haven't.
No, stop. You don't know anything about these January 6 cases. You don't know why these people are in jail. You don't know that a man is in Brooklyn right now for 3 years without charge or trial. And when Donald Trump says these people have been held for too long, you say, no, Trump is wrong. Keep them locked up. That's fascist. Dude. You've been sitting here with no knowledge of the specifics of some of these cases. There is a man in Brooklyn right now. I'm going to say it again. No charges whatsoever brought. And he's been in jail for 3 years. For you to sit there and say it is good that he remains locked up is fascism. That is saying the hierarchical system of the courts and the government is just, and the process is all that matters. And I am saying perhaps 3 years is enough, because I actually have moral logic and an understanding of these cases. Hence, my position on January 6th has always been the people who have attacked police must go to prison. But 3 years is a time for assault on an officer. We have seen people on the far left, notably when they were firebombing all across Minnesota, 33 people murdered. And how many criminal charges do we get for this? When they firebombed a police station and forced the police to evacuate on May 29th, 2020, when thousands of far leftists firebombed the White House grounds and set fire to St. John's Church and injured 100 police officers, how many people went to prison for 3 years?
That's the important thing to note. If you looked at the footage that Democrats tried to hide up until we got the majority, you'll notice that when people entered the building, there was practically no dangerous acts or disrespect to the chamber. I was trying to find the clip, but somehow it got buried, but there was a clip of January 6ers picking up literal garbage from the ground. And we're supposed to believe that Congress men and women feared for their lives. I mean, give me a break. Now, the footage of the protesters pushing police with riot shields and breaking glass and whatnot, yeah, they should have been jailed for some time, but 3-4 years now? Like, should their lives be ruined for that? Like, come on, everyone has a bad day, and the reason January 6th happened in the first place was because we didn't have platforms like Twitter to disseminate information freely. Republicans were getting banned for posting basic information on jabs. We had literal government tyranny locking us up, and once January 6th happened, it somehow, in a Democrat's mind, became worse than 9/11, and the FBI had to ping everyone's phone's IPs in the vicinity, but they couldn't go to that level when BLM burnt down Minneapolis. Anyways, let's get back to this utter destruction, because there's plenty more.
How many of them who never showed up on that day are in prison for 20 years? Enrique Tarrio wasn't even in D.C. on January 6th. And you are saying that man who his only crime was, quote, don't leave. That's his only crime. You think he should be in prison for 20 years because you're a fascist. You don't care what the facts are. You don't care if this is unjust. You only care that the machine state has decreed you are not to be locked up. And this is the problem I have with the left. They don't know the facts. They don't care about the facts. They view morality as a blanket government stroke of the pen, and every person, regardless of their crime, should be in prison for decades. I reject it outright. The people who fought cops should go to prison. They did. It's been 3 years. But when you've got people who are on misdemeanor charges for having walked into a building at 4 p.m. after the riot, and I know some of these people, they walked into a building for 2 minutes and walked out, and they got 18 months for that. I don't see you defending the innocent people who walked onto a public grass at a public building after a riot had been completed. You don't know. You don't care. You've taken a tribal position, and people are suffering because of it. Now you say that Donald Trump saying the injustice that we've seen warrants commutation or pardons. You say that means he's advocating for violence. This is the ultimate problem. Then you cite a press release from Maryland saying, but the right's more violent. There is a distinction between a white supremacist as a right-wing group and a run-of-the-mill Christian conservative who showed up on that day not to protest. Let's talk about Brandon Strzok. He never went in the building. He was on the other side of the building. There was a permitted protest. He walked up the stairs and he was yelling. They put this guy in prison. There is Owen Schroyer, who was at a permitted rally who was yelling death to communists. They put him in prison and specifically cited his speech. My dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's fine. I get it. We try to be polite. We try to be nice. But there are so many young liberals who sit here and say, the corporate press told me that these people are bad and the machine state government has decreed it by pen. So I don't care what crime they committed. I don't care what the jury said. I don't care who was on the jury. Enrique Tarrio, who was not there, should be in prison for 2 decades. Tell me this now. Why is Enrique Tarrio in prison?
Yeah, so they uncovered with him his plot to overthrow the government.
Enrique Tarrio, is it?
Yeah, and his organization.
What plot? Who's they? Give me some
prosecutors.
Give me some fucking data. Stop squinting at me and saying the prosecutors did a thing. You didn't know. You didn't read it. You didn't read the court papers. All you know is the fascist machine state told you he should be in prison, and you're saying yes to them.
Oh man, I can feel this liberal's uncomfortable energy from a mile away. But that's what happens when your basic level knowledge of January 6th, coupled with Democrat talking points, goes against an experienced debater that researches the news. And look, we could continuously bully this kid, but he represents the standard issue Democrat talking points. So we're using him as an example because if both Democrats and Republicans are willing to do research on their own about politics, a lot of us would be able to reach common ground faster. We should be able to come to the agreement that both sides, majority of the time, have good intentions when protesting, but we can also admit that violence, destruction of property is wrong and should be prosecuted. If a January 6er destroyed property and a BLMer destroyed property at the same level, they should get prosecuted at the same amount. And we should be able to admit that BLM caused more deaths, 19 actually, and January 6 caused 1 death. BLM caused more property damage, billions of dollars actually, and January 6 caused windows needing to be replaced. I can therefore, through common sense, say January 6 was embarrassing, but it was not that big of a deal, and then say BLM was a much bigger deal, as it affected citizens more than elected officials, and actually was a scam since the organizers used it for personal profit and then led to a more politicized jury. That's not me being biased, that's me looking at what happened objectively, and I think we need to have more of that in this country.